I asked you last week, I will repeat today. Have you ever done anything so dumb that you have found it difficult forgiving yourself? Dumbest thing I ever did do. And you just have a difficult time forgiving yourself of that dumb thing. I've been there, done that. And I want to suggest to you that this sort of thing happens in and around the church on occasion. In fact, quite often. Well-intentioned persons, people who didn't set out to do something dumb, they were well-intentioned. They thought they were doing something pretty smart. But they were well-intentioned persons, and at some point in time, they suffer a temporary lapse in judgment, and they end up doing something that they ultimately regret. Now watch this. Quite often, and I want you to remember this because this is really what we're dealing with. Quite often, those individuals become so vexed in their soul, in their mind, that they find difficulty functioning in and being a contributing member of the church, getting plugged in and really serving the Lord. They're like, man, after that dumb thing, I just can't plug in to the church. Well, we established last week, and I'm summarizing somewhat, we established that God has made provision for you, regardless of who you are. Whether you've been here since May 18th, 1997, or if today's your very first day at New Life, God has made provision for you to be pardoned of any and every sin that you've ever committed. I believe that. We gave you a lot of Bible along those lines last week. Listen, often what God says and what God does and what men hear and what men accept are worlds apart. Some hear about God's plan of salvation, and yet there is that something, that little thing, or perhaps something in their mind's a big thing, but there's that thing in their life that leaves them with the opinion, I'm just too much of a sinner. God can't or God won't forgive me. For some, the truth of the matter is, it isn't God that will not forgive their grievous sins, but they can't seem to forgive their self. Again, a battle of the mind. And the mind is where the overwhelming majority of this takes place. For various reasons, and I'm headed to number one on your study notes. Please fill these in with me today. But for various reasons, many make the decision. Can you say, I have a choice? Many make the decision to embrace the guilt that is associated with sin. Many of these same persons may confess, and again I'm headed to number one here, they may confess they believe God has forgiven them of the action of their ill-fated decision. But they believe they're actually doing their part by continuing to embrace the guilt. God did His part by forgiving me. I'll do my part by continuing to embrace this guilt. Or, and this is what happens so many times, people say this to me, maybe not outright, maybe not verbatim, but you know, when you just boil it all down, when you distill it down, here's what it comes down to. Individuals would indicate no matter how often I confess a certain thing, no matter how often I confess this dumb thing, I just can't seem to shake the guilt. Just can't seem to get rid of the guilt. Listen, that's not how God wants you to live. By the way, some preachers, some churches, some movements have done a really good job of making people think that that is the way God wants you to live. God wants you to be guilty. As long as you're guilty, you're spiritual. That's insane. Can you say that's insane? It is insane. And if you've never, ever heard that before, I hope you hear it now. God does not want you living that way. God has made provision for you to have life, and that more abundantly. That's what His Word says, and that's all I can go by is His Word.